Hello, beautiful people. I finally found a way to do a voiceover over a video clip. So instead of a whip and chat, I thought it would be fun to just tell you a fairy tale. Now, these fairy tales are not only for children, so I hope you enjoy. I found while I was looking into the picture of the video unboxing I did for the Slavic fairy tales, I stumbled on fairy tales of Slavic countries and I started reading and it was really fun. So I thought this would be a good alternative instead of a whip and chat because I don't always know what to talk about and I love fairy tales. And this one has been written by a folklorist. His name was Parker Fillmore, and that's a man that lived in the 18. He was born in 1878 and died in 1944. And during his life, he wrote books all with Slavic fairy tales, Czechoslovak, Finnish, Yugoslavia, Croatian, Russian. But the one I want to tell you tonight is a Czechoslovak story. So let's get on with it. I hope you enjoy. The story title is Clever Manka. The story of a girl who knew what to say. There was once a rich farmer who was as grasping as unscrupulous as he was rich. He was always driving a hard bargain and always getting the better of his poor neighbors. One of these neighbors was a humble shepherd who, in return for services, was to receive from the farmer a heifer. A heifer, that's a young cow that hasn't gotten a calf yet. So, when the time of payment came, the farmer refused to give the shepherd the heifer, and the shepherd was forced to lay the matter before the burgomaster. A burgomaster is something like in nowadays a mayor, so the chief of a big city. The burgomaster, who was a young man and as yet not very experienced, listened to both sides, and when he had deliberated, he said, "Instead of deciding this case, I will put a riddle to you both, and the man who makes the best answer shall have the heifer. Are you agreed?" The farmer and the shepherd accepted this proposal, and the burgomaster said, "Well then, here is my riddle. What is the swiftest thing in the world? What is the sweetest thing? What is the richest? Think out your answers and bring them to me at this same hour tomorrow." The farmer went home in a temper. "What kind of burgomaster is this young fellow?" he growled. "If he had let me keep the heifer, I'd have sent him a bushel of pears. But now I'm in a fair way of losing the heifer, for I can't think of any answer to this foolish riddle." "What is the matter, husband?" his wife asked. "It's that new burgomaster. The old one would have given me the heifer without any argument, but this young man thinks to decide the case by asking us riddles." When he told his wife what the riddle was, she cheered him greatly by telling him that she knew the answers at once. "Why, husband," said she, "our grey, that's a horse, our grey mare must be the swiftest thing in the world. You know yourself, nothing ever passes us on the road. As for the sweetest, did you ever taste honey any sweeter than ours? And I'm sure there's nothing richer than our chest of golden ducats that we've been laying by these 40 years. The farmer was delighted. You're right, wife, you're right. That heifer remains ours. The shepherd, when he got home, was downcast and sad. He had a daughter, a clever girl named Manka, who met him at the door of his cottage and asked, "What is it, father? What did the burgomaster say?" The shepherd sighed. "I'm afraid I've lost a heifer. The burgomaster said us a riddle, and I know I shall never guess it." "Perhaps I can help you," Manka said. "What is it?" So the shepherd gave her the riddle, and the next day, as he was setting out for the burgomaster's, Manka told him what answers to make. When he reached the burgomaster's house, the farmer was already there, rubbing his hands and beaming with self-importance. The burgomaster again propounded the riddle and then asked the farmer his answers. The farmer cleared his throat and with a pompous air began, "The swiftest thing in the world. Why, my dear sir, that's my grey mare, of course, for no other horse ever passes us on the road." "The sweetest? Honey from my beehives, to be sure. The richest? What can be richer than my chest of golden ducats?" And the farmer squared his shoulders and smiled triumphantly. Said the young burgomaster dryly. Then he asked, "What answer does the shepherd make?" The shepherd bowed politely and said, "The swiftest thing in the world is thought, for thought can run any distance in the twinkling of an eye. The sweetest thing of all is sleep, for when a man is tired and sad, what can be sweeter? The richest thing in the earth is the earth, for out of the earth come all of the riches of the world." "Good!" the burgomaster cried. "Good! The heifer goes to the shepherd." Later, the burgomaster said to the shepherd, "Tell me, now, who gave you those answers? I'm sure they never came out of your own head." At first the shepherd tried not to tell, but when the burgomaster pressed him, he confessed that they came from his daughter, Manka. The burgomaster, who thought he would like to make another test of Manka's cleverness, sent for 10 eggs. He gave them to the shepherd and said, "Take these eggs to Manka and tell her to have them hatched out by tomorrow and to bring me the chicks." When the shepherd reached home and gave Manka the burgomaster's message, Manka laughed and said, "Take a handful of millet and go right back down to the burgomaster. Say to him, 'My daughter sends you this millet. She says that if you plant it, grow it, and have it harvested by tomorrow, she'll bring you the 10 chicks and you can feed them the ripe grain.'" When the burgomaster heard this, he laughed heartily. "That's a clever girl of yours," he told the shepherd. "If she's as comely as she is clever, I think I'd like to marry her. Tell her to come to see me, but she must come neither by day nor by night, neither riding nor walking, neither dressed nor undressed." When Manka received this message, she waited until the next dawn when night was gone and day not yet arrived. Then she wrapped herself in a fishnet and, throwing one leg over Goat's back and keeping one foot on the ground, she went to the burgomaster's house. Now, I ask you, did she go dressed? No, she wasn't dressed. A fishnet is not clothing. Did she go undressed? Of course not, for wasn't she covered with a fishnet? Did she walk to the burgomaster's? No, she didn't walk, for she went with one leg thrown over a goat. Then did she ride? Of course she didn't ride, for wasn't she walking on one foot? When she reached the burgomaster's house, she called out, "Here I am, Mr. Burgomaster, and I've come neither by day or night, neither riding nor walking, neither dressed nor undressed." The young burgomaster was so delighted with Manka's cleverness and so pleased with her comely looks that he proposed to her at once and in a short time married her. "But understand, my dear Manka," he said, "you are not to use that cleverness of yours at my expense. I won't have you interfering in any of my cases. In fact, if ever you give advice to anyone who comes to me for judgment, I'll turn you out of my house at once and send you home to your father." All went well for a time. Manka busied herself in her housekeeping and was careful not to interfere in any of the burgomaster's cases. Then one day 2 farmers came to the burgomaster to have a dispute settled. One of the farmers owned a mare which had foaled in the marketplace. The colt had run under the wagon of the other farmer, and thereupon the owner of the wagon claimed the colt as his property. The burgomaster, who was thinking of something else while the case was being presented, said carelessly, "The man who found the colt under his wagon, of course, is the owner of the colt." As the owner of the mare was leaving the burgomaster's house, he met Manka and stopped to tell her about the case. Manka was ashamed of her husband for making so foolish a decision, and she said to the farmer, "Come back this afternoon with a fishing net and stretch it across the dirty road. When the burgomaster sees you, he will come out and ask you what you are doing. Say to him that you are catching fish. When he asks you how he can expect to catch fish in a dusty road, tell him it's just as easy for you to catch fish in a dusty road as it is for a wagon to fall. Then he'll see the injustice of his decision and have the colt returned to you. But remember one thing, you mustn't let him find out it was who I told you to do this." That afternoon, when the burgomaster changed the look out the window, That afternoon, when the burgomaster chanced to look out of the window, he saw a man stretching a fishnet across the dirty road. He went out to him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Fishing." "Fishing in a dusty road? Are you daft?" "Well," the man said, "it's just as easy for me to catch fish in a dusty road as it is for a wagon to fall." Then the burgomaster recognized the man as the owner of the mare, and he had to confess that what he said was true. "Of course the colt belongs to your mare and must be returned to you. But tell me," he said, "who put you up to this? You didn't think of it yourself." The farmer tried not to tell, but the burgomaster questioned him until he found out that Manka was at the bottom of it. This made him very angry. Oh, ego, oh, ego. He went into the house and called his wife. "Manka," he said, "do you forget what I told you would happen if you went interfering in any of my cases? Home you go this very day. I don't care to hear any excuses. The matter is settled. You may take with you the one thing you like best in my house, for I won't have people saying that I treated you shabbily." Manka made no outcry. "Very well, my dear husband. I shall do as you say. I shall go home to my father's cottage and take with me the one thing I like best in your house. But don't make me go until after supper. We have been very happy together, and I should like to eat one last meal with you. Let us have no more words, but be kind to each other as we've always been, and then part as friends." The burgomaster agreed to this, and Manka prepared a fine supper of all the dishes of which her husband was particularly fond. The burgomaster opened his choice wine and pledged Manka's health. Then he set to, and the supper was so good that he ate and ate and ate, and the more he ate, the more he drank, until at last he grew drowsy and fell sound asleep in his chair. Then, without awakening him, Manka had him carried out of the wagon to the wagon that was waiting to take her home to her father. The next morning, when the burgomaster opened his eyes, he found himself laying in the shepherd's cottage. "What does this mean?" he roared out. "Nothing, dear husband, nothing," Manka said. "You know you told me I might take with me the one thing I like best in your house, so of course I took you, that's all." For a moment the burgomaster rubbed his eyes in amazement. Then he laughed loud and heartily. To think how Manka had outwitted him. "Manka," he said, "you're too clever for me. Come on, my dear, let's go home." So they climbed back into the wagon and drove home. The burgomaster never again scolded his wife, but thereafter, whenever a difficult case came up, he always said, "I think we had better consult my wife. You know, she's a very clever woman." Ah, so romantic. Yet again, yeah, power of a woman. So I hope you enjoyed this fairy tale. I still have got another one. I will have to look for it. I'm just taking a sip of my drink. And let's check. It is all by this same Parker Fillmore, because he wrote down some of great stories of the Slavic countries. And I found another one that I was really found about. Very strange story. If you like some absurd things, well, absurdity in stories. And I really like stories like this because, yeah, they're full of culture and the customs of countries, and so let's do hope. Okay, so this one is called The Dragon's Strength, the story of the youngest prince who killed the sparrow. And this says it's Slavic, so the origin is not really clear, but it's a Slavic country. So, let's begin. Just a sip and a vape. I'm sorry, yeah, I know, I'm vaping. So, the story of the youngest prince who killed the sparrow. There was once a king who had 3 sons. One day the oldest son went hunting, and when night fell, his huntsmen came riding home without him. "Where is the prince?" the king asked. "Isn't he here?" the huntsman said. "He left us in mid-afternoon chasing a hare near the old mill up the river. We haven't seen him since, and we supposed he must have come home alone." When he hadn't returned the following day, his brother, the second prince, went out to search for him. "I'll go to the old mill," he said to the king, "and see what's become of him." So he mounted his horse and rode up the river. As he neared the old mill, a hare crossed his path, and the second prince, being a hunter, like his brother, at once gave chase. His attendant waited for his return, but waited in vain. Night fell, and still there was no sign of the second prince. The attendant returned to the palace and told the king what had happened. Sorry. The king was surprised, but not unduly alarmed, and the following day, when the youngest prince asked to go hunting alone, the king suggested that he go in the direction of the old mill to find out if he could know what was keeping his brothers. The youngest prince, who had listened carefully to what his brother's attendants had reported, decided to act cautiously. So when a hare crossed his path as he approached the old mill, instead of giving chase, he rode off as though he were hunting other game. Later he returned to the old mill from another direction. He found an old woman sitting in front of it. "Good evening, Granny," he said in a friendly tone, pulling up his horse for a moment's chat. "Do you live here? You know, I thought the old mill was deserted." The old woman looked at him and shook her head gloomily. "Deserted indeed. My boy, take an old woman's advice and don't have anything to do with this old mill. It's an evil place." "Why, Granny?" the prince said. "What's the matter with it?" The old woman peered cautiously around, and when she saw they were alone, she beckoned the prince to come near. Then she whispered, "A dragon lives here, a horrible monster. He takes the form of a hare and lures people into the mill. Then he captures them. Some of them he kills and eats, and others he holds as prisoners in an underground dungeon. I am one of his prisoners, and he keeps me here to work for him." "Granny," the youngest prince said, "would you like me to rescue you?" "My boy, you couldn't do it. You have no idea what a strong, evil monster the dragon is." "If you find out something for me, Granny, I think I might be able to overcome the dragon and rescue you." The old woman was doubtful, but she promised to do anything the youngest prince asked. "Well then, Granny, find out from the dragon where his strength is, whether in his own body or somewhere else. Find out tonight, and I'll come back tomorrow at this same hour to see you." So that night, when the dragon came home, after he had supped, and when he was scratching his head to make him drowsy for bed, the old woman said to him, "Master, I think you're the strongest dragon in the world. Tell me now, where does your strength lie? In your own beautiful body or somewhere else?" "You're right, woman. You're right, old woman," the dragon grunted. "I am pretty strong as dragons go. But I don't keep my strength in my own body. No, indeed. That would be too dangerous. I keep it in the hearth yonder. Hearth yonder, that's a distant spot in the fireplace." At that, the old woman ran over to the hearth and stooping down, she kissed it and caressed it. "Oh, beautiful hearth," she said, "where my master's strength is hidden, how happy are the ashes that cover your stones." The dragon laughed with amusement. "That's the time I fooled you, old woman. My strength isn't in the hearth at all. It's in the tree in front of the mill." The old woman at once ran out of the mill and threw her arms around the tree. "Oh, tree," she cried, "most beautiful tree in the world, guard carefully our master's strength and let no harm come to it." Again the dragon laughed. "I fooled you another time, old woman. Come here and scratch my head some more, and this time I'll tell you the truth, for I see you really love your master." So the old woman went back and scratched the dragon's head, and the dragon told her the truth about his strength. "I keep it far away," he said, "in the third kingdom from here. Near the Tsar's own city there is a deep lake. A lake. A dragon lives at the bottom of the lake. In the dragon there's a wild boar. In the boar a hare. In the hare a pigeon. In the pigeon a sparrow. My strength is in the sparrow. Let anyone kill the sparrow, and I should die that instant. But I am safe. No one but shepherds ever come to that lake, and even they don't come anymore, for the dragon has eaten up so many of them that the lake has got a bad name. Indeed, nowadays even the Tsar himself hard put to it to find a shepherd. Oh, I tell you, old woman, your master is a clever one." So now the old woman had the dragon's secret, and the next day she told it to the youngest prince. He had once devised a plan whereby he hoped to overcome the dragon. He dressed himself as a shepherd and with crook in hand started off on foot for the third kingdom. He traveled through villages and towns, across rivers and over mountains, and reached at last the third kingdom and the Tsar's own city. He presented himself at the palace and asked employment as a shepherd. The guards looked at him in surprise and said, "A shepherd? Are you sure you want to be a shepherd?" Then they called their companions. "Here's a youth who wants to be a shepherd." And the word went through the palace, and even the Tsar heard it. "Send the youth to me," he ordered. "Do you really want to be my shepherd?" he asked the youngest prince. The youngest prince said, "Yes," he did. "If I put you in charge of the sheep, where would you pasture them?" "Isn't there a lake beyond the city?" the prince asked, "where the grazing is good?" Said the Tsar. "So you know about that lake too. What else do you know?" "I've heard the shepherds disappear." "And still you want to try your luck?" the Tsar exclaimed. Just then the Tsar's only daughter, a lovely princess, who had been looking at the young stranger, slipped over to her father and whispered, "But father, you can't let such a handsome young man as that go off with the sheep. It would be dreadful if he never returned." The Tsar whispered back, "Shh, child. Your concern for the young man's safety does credit to your noble feelings. But this is not the time or the place for that sentiment. We must consider first the welfare of the royal sheep." He turned to the youngest prince. "Very well, young man, you may consider yourself engaged as shepherd. Provide yourself with whatever you need and assume your duties at once." "There is one thing," the youngest prince said. "When I start out tomorrow morning with the sheep, I would like to take with me 2 strong boarhounds, a falcon, and a set of bagpipes." "You shall have them all," the Tsar promised. Early the next morning, when the princess peeped out of her bedroom window, she saw the new shepherd driving the royal flocks to the pasture. Sorry. A falcon was perched on his shoulder. He had a set of bagpipes under his arm, and he was leading 2 powerful boarhounds on a leash. "It's a shame," the princess said to herself. "He'll probably never return, and he's such a handsome young man too." And she was so unhappy at the thought of never seeing him again, the new shepherd, that she couldn't go back to sleep. Well, the youngest prince reached the lake and turned out his sheep to graze. He perched the falcon on a log, tied the dogs beside it, and laid his bagpipes on the ground. Then he took off his smock, rolled up his hose, and wading boldly into the lake, called out in a loud voice, "Ho, dragon! Come out and we'll try a wrestling match. That is, if you're not afraid." "Afraid?" bellowed an awful voice. "Who's afraid?" The water of the lake churned this way and that, and a horrible scaly monster came to the surface. He crawled out on shore and clutched the prince around the waist. And the prince clutched him in a grip just as strong, and there they swayed back and forth and rolled over and wrestled together on the shore of the lake without either getting the better of the other. By mid-afternoon, when the sun was hot, the dragon grew faint and cried out, "Oh, if I could but dip my burning head in the cool water, then I could toss you as high as the sky." "Don't talk nonsense," the prince said. "If the Tsar's daughter would kiss my forehead, then I could toss you twice as high." After that, the dragon slipped out of the prince's grasp, plunged into the water, and disappeared. The prince waited for him, but he didn't show his scaly head again that day. When evening came, the prince washed off the grime of the fight, dressed himself carefully, and then, looking as fresh and handsome as ever, drove home his sheep. With the falcon on his shoulder and 2 hounds at his heels, he came playing a merry tune on his bagpipes. The townspeople, hearing the bagpipes, ran out of their horses and cried to each other, "The shepherd's come back!" The princess ran to her window, and when she saw the shepherd alive and well, she put her hand to her heart and said, "Oh!" Even the Tsar was pleased. "I'm not a bit surprised that he's back," he said. "There's something about this youth that I like." The next day the Tsar sent 2 of his trusted servants to the lake to see what was happening there. They hid themselves behind some bushes on a little hill that commanded the lake. They were there when the shepherd arrived, and they watched him as he waded out into the water and challenged the dragon as on the day before. They heard the shepherd call out in a loud voice, "Ho, dragon, come out, and we'll try a wrestling match. That is, if you're not afraid." And from the water they heard an awful voice bellow back, "Afraid? Who's afraid?" Then they saw the water of the lake churn this way and that, and a horrible scaly monster came to the surface. They saw him crawl out on shore and clutch the shepherd around the waist. And they saw the shepherd clutch him in a grip just as strong. And they watched the 2 as they swayed back and forth and rolled over and wrestled together without either getting the better of the other. By mid-afternoon, when the sun grew hot, they saw the dragon grow faint, and they heard him cry out, "Oh, if I could only dip my burning head in the cool water, then I could toss you as high as the sky." And then they heard the shepherd reply, "Don't talk nonsense. If the Tsar's daughter would kiss my forehead, then I could toss you twice as high." Then they saw the dragon slip out of the shepherd's grasp, plunge into the water, and disappear. They waited, but he didn't show his scaly head again that day. So the Tsar's servants hurried home before the shepherd and told the Tsar all they had seen and heard. The Tsar was mightily impressed with the bravery of the shepherd, and he declared that if he killed that horrid dragon, he would have the princess herself for a wife. He sent for his daughter and told her all that his servants had reported, and said to her, "My daughter, you, too, can help rid your country of this monster if you go out with the shepherd tomorrow, and when the time comes, kiss him on the forehead. You will do this, will you not, for your country's sake?" The princess blushed and trembled, and the Tsar, looking at her in surprise, said, "What? Shall a humble shepherd face a dragon unafraid, and the daughter of a Tsar tremble?" "Father," the princess cried, "it isn't a dragon that I'm afraid of." "What then?" the Tsar asked. But what it was she was afraid of, the princess would not confess. Instead, she said, "If the welfare of my country require that I kiss the shepherd on the forehead, I shall do so." So the next morning, when the shepherd started out with his sheep, the falcon on his shoulder, the dogs at his heels, the bagpipes under his arm, the princess walked beside him. Her eyes were downcast, and he saw that she was trembling. "Do not be afraid, dear princess," he said to her. "Nothing shall harm you, I promise you that." "I'm not afraid," the princess murmured. But she continued to blush and tremble, and although the shepherd tried to look into her eyes to reassure her, she kept her head averted. This time the Tsar himself and many of his courtiers had gone on before and taken their stand on the hill that overlooked the lake to see the final combat of the shepherd and the dragon. When the shepherd and the princess reached the lake, the shepherd put his falcon on the log as before, and tied the dogs beside him and laid his bagpipes on the ground. Then he threw off his smock, rolled up his hose, and wading boldly into the lake, called out in a low, loud voice, "Ho, dragon! Come out, and we'll try a wrestling match. That is, if you're not afraid." "Afraid?" bellowed an awful voice. "Who's afraid?" The water of the lake churned this way and that, and the horrible scaly monster came to the surface. He crawled to shore and clutched the shepherd around the waist. The shepherd clutched him in a grip just as strong, and they were swaying back and forth and rolled over and wrestled together on the shore of the lake without either getting the better of the other. The princess, without the least show of fear, stood nearby, calling out encouragement to the shepherd and waiting for the moment when the shepherd should need her help. By mid-afternoon, when the sun was hot, the dragon grew faint and cried out, "Oh, if I could but dip my burning head in the cool water, then I could toss you as high as the sky." "Don't talk nonsense," the shepherd said. "If the Tsar's daughter would kiss me my forehead, then I could toss you twice as high." Instantly, the princess ran forward and kissed the shepherd 3 times. The first kiss fell on his forehead, the second on his nose, the third on his mouth. With each kiss, his strength increased 100-fold, and taking the dragon in a mighty grip, he tossed him so high that for a moment the Tsar and all the courtiers lost sight of him in the sky. Then he fell to earth with such a thud that he burst. Out of his body sprang a wild boar. The shepherd was ready for this, and on the moment he unleashed the 2 hounds, and they fell on the boar and tore him to pieces. Out of the boar jumped a rabbit. It went leaping across the meadow, but the dogs caught it and killed it. Out of the rabbit flew a pigeon. Instantly the shepherd unloosed the falcon. It rose high in the air, then swooped down upon the pigeon, clutched it in its talons, and delivered it into the shepherd's hands. He cut open the pigeon and found the sparrow. Spare me, squeaked the sparrow. Tell me where my brothers are, the shepherd demanded, with his fingers about the sparrow's throat. Your brothers? They are alive and in the deep dungeon that lies below the old mill. Behind the mill there are 3 willow saplings growing from one old root. Cut the saplings and strike the root. A heavy iron door leading down into the dungeon will open. In the dungeon you will find many captives, old and young, your brothers among them. Now that I have told you this, are you going to spare my life? But the shepherd wrung the sparrow's neck, for he knew that only in that way could the monster who had captured his brothers be killed. Well, now that the dragon was dead, the Tsar and all his courtiers came down from the hill and embraced the shepherd and told him what a brave youth he was. You have delivered us all from a horrid monster, the Tsar said, and to show you my gratitude and the country's gratitude, I offer you my daughter for wife. Thank you, said the shepherd, but I couldn't think of marrying the princess unless she is willing to marry me. The princess blushed and trembled just as she had blushed and trembled the night before and that morning too on the way to the lake. She tried to speak but could not at first. Then in a very little voice she said, As a princess, I think it's my duty to marry this brave shepherd who has delivered my country from this terrible dragon, and I think I should want to marry him anyway. She said the last part of her speech in such a very low voice that only the shepherd himself heard it. But that was right enough, because after all it was intended only for him. So then and there, beside the lake, before even the shepherd had time to wash his face and hands and put on his smock, the Tsar put the princess' hand in his hand and pronounced them betrothed. After that, the shepherd bathed in the lake, and then refreshed and cleaned his sounded his bagpipes, and he and the princess and the Tsar and all the courtiers returned to the city, driving the sheep before them. All the townspeople came out to meet them, and they danced to the music of the bagpipes, and there was great rejoicing both over the death of the dragon and over the betrothal of the princess and the brave shepherd. The wedding took place at once, and the wedding festivities lasted a week. Such feasting as the townspeople had, such music and dancing! When the wedding festivities were ended, the shepherd told the Tsar who he really was. "You say you're a prince?" the Tsar cried, perfectly delighted at this news. Then he declared he wasn't in the least surprised. In fact, he said he had suspected as much from the first. "Do you think it likely," he asked somewhat pompously, "that any daughter of mine would fall in love with a man who wasn't a prince?" "I think I'd have fallen in love with him, in love with you, whatever you are," whispered the princess to her young husband. But she didn't let her father hear her. The prince told the Tsar about his brother's captivity and how he must go home to release them, and the Tsar at once said that he and his bride might go provided they returned as soon as possible. They agreed to this, and the Tsar fitted out a splendid escort for them and sent them away with his blessing. So the prince now traveled back through the towns and villages of 3 kingdoms, across rivers and over mountains, no longer a humble shepherd on foot, but a rich and mighty personage riding in a manner that befitted his rank. When he reached the deserted mill, his friend the old woman was waiting for him. "I know, my prince, you have succeeded, for the monster has disappeared." "Yes, Granny, you are right, I have succeeded. I found the dragon in the lake, and the boar in the dragon, and the rabbit in the boar, and the pigeon in the rabbit, and the sparrow in the pigeon. I took the sparrow and killed it, so you are free now, Granny, to return to your home, and soon all those other poor captives will be free." He went behind the mill and found the 3 willow saplings. He cut them off and struck the old root. Sure enough, a heavy iron door opened. This led down into a deep dungeon, which was crowded with unfortunate prisoners. The prince let them all out and sent them their various ways. He found his own 2 brothers among them and led them home to his father. There was great rejoicing in the king's house and in the king's heart too, for he had given up hope of ever seeing any of his sons again. The king was so charmed with the princess that he said it was a pity that she couldn't marry his oldest son, so that she might one day be a queen. "The youngest prince is a capable young man," the king said, "and there's no denying that he managed this business of killing the dragon very neatly. But he is, after all, only the youngest prince, with very little hope of succeeding to the kingdom. If you hadn't married him in such haste, one of his older brothers might easily have fallen in love with you." "I don't regret my haste," the princess said. "Besides, he is now my father's heir. But that doesn't matter, for I should be happy with the youngest prince if he were only a shepherd." Oh, isn't that beautiful? So she would love him either way. The only thing I regret about this story is that the dragon is an evil dragon. And I always think of dragons like being not evil. But anyway, this was the story. I hope you liked it. If this is something you would like to have more of, please let me know in the comments. Or if you say, no, this is not really my thing. We are as good friends as we are, but I just wanted to try something else. I'm using a very neat app on my phone to do this, so I hope when I listen to this recording that the sound is good enough, because I'm wearing a special headset that's not in my ears but on my cheekbone. It's a very special thing. So the sound is going through my cheekbones instead of my ears. It's a very strange thing, but it works, and it's comfy because I don't like those thingies in my ear. Let's see, how many minutes do we have left? 15 minutes? Yeah, 15 minutes. So, oh, there's a fly in my drink. Of course, there is. It's spring, so the flies are returning. I will have to take you out with some tweezers. Come out, come out. Poor lad has drowned already. Ugh. I hate it when they do that. And I would love to tell you some other stories as well, not only Slavic stories, but also stories of other countries. I remember when I used to sleep over at my niece's house. Her father would always tell us bedtime stories. He would read to us from books with Japanese stories, Chinese stories, and one time he read to us from what's that movie called and the book? The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Oh my god. It's all that reading. It's like, ooh. Yeah, the Lord of the Rings. So he read to us when we were young kids. So and my attention span was not that high, so I believe I didn't catch a lot of the story when I was young. I know I was afraid when they started talking about Gollum or about the spider, but when I saw the movie, I just did not remember that much of the story. But anyway, it's cool when a father reads stories like that to his children, I think. And yeah, fairy tales and stories are not only for young children, they are for anyone with who's young at heart. So, yeah, that's something I experimented with this voice over. I really hope this works because it's neat. And when you're doing a whip and chat, it's yeah, it's difficult nowadays because my kids are home. It's Wednesday today, but they didn't have school, and I was really disappointed. But because after the quarantine, I was really happy to be able to send them to school, and then I checked my calendar and I was like, oh no. They're at home Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so 5 days. So I love my children, but now that spring is coming, I don't know what's happening. They are so energetic. Really. And but today it was a good day. They really played together nicely without making too much noise and not fighting. That's a good thing. They were playing a game on Roblox, and when they're not playing on their computer, they're playing Floor is Lava. And that's really funny because then they start to put down blankets and cushions on the floor and all around in the living room, in the kitchen. There's this little turn they make, and then they come back again, and they, oh my god, it's so funny to watch them. And then it's always, the floor is lava. So yeah, that's my life right now. Kids, trying to keep them fed and washed, and trying to get them to brush their teeth, and funny thing is they always walk around in their underwear when they're home because we have a really warm home here. It's We have got triple glass. Our windows are triple glass, so even when the sun is up and without heating, it's always a nice 24 degrees Celsius in our house, so that's really warm. 24 or 22, let's say. So, I think this is it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. And I've got another unboxing to do, but that will be one for tomorrow because today now I'm tired. I'm going to eat some spaghetti that my husband made. Yeah, he cooks. It's really great. I cook too, but he cooks also. So he made spaghetti bolognese, and then he will go and practice music with his band. So I will be at home with the children again. And I will try to get them to take a shower. So, and then I will sit back in my recliner and just crochet for a little bit. So, thank you all for listening. I hope you made it to the end of this video. If this is not for you, I can understand. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please consider subscribing or giving me a thumbs up would be nice. And hit the bell to be notified anytime I do another crazy experiment with voiceover or something. And thank you so much for your comments and everything. It's really, really fun to read all you guys, your yeah, I love reading the comments. So thank you again. I hope you have a really, really great day, great evening, great week, and see you in the next clip. Bye, guys.